Istria is one of the most well-known regions in Croatia, especially for its coastline, historic towns, and the local foodie culture. Experiencing Istria now, after living in Zagreb, just feels a little different compared to visiting in the past as a tourist. Because what works well as a place to visit doesn't always translate into something that works for everyday life. With roughly 400 kilometers of coastline, access to beaches, historic hilltop towns, and regional specialties like olive oil, it's easy to understand why this area attracts so much attention. In this video, I want to use this Easter weekend trip to Istria to show how these places fit into real life in Croatia, not just as a destination, but as part of life here. To understand how this works in practice, I spent time in Pula, one of the larger cities in the region. This is probably closer to what many people imagine when they think about living in Croatia. Coastal city, more relaxed, connected to the sea. And that part is definitely true. But once you start thinking beyond visiting, other factors become more important. Compared to a city like Zagreb, Pula feels quieter in terms of professional activities and overall structure. It's more seasonal, especially outside of the summer months. So while it offers a very appealing lifestyle, it doesn't always provide the same level of stability for long-term living, depending on your situation. That's something you don't really notice as a tourist, but it becomes much more clearer once you live here. On this trip, I also visited Labin, a smaller historic hilltop town above the coast. Places like this show a completely different side of Croatia. More traditional, more local, and much quieter. And for some people, this is exactly what they're looking for. But again, living here is very different from visiting. Daily life would mean fewer services, fewer opportunities, and a much slower pace. This is something you don't really think about when you're just walking through for a few hours. But it becomes important when you consider what your everyday routine would actually look like. These kinds of places can work well, but only if your lifestyle fits that level of simplicity. Just below the hilltop town of Labin is Rabac, a small coastal town. This is probably one of the popular versions of Croatia that attracts people the most. The coastline, the views, the slower pace of life. And being here, it's easy to understand why. But this is also where expectations and reality can start to differ. For most people, this kind of environment works best as part of life, not the entire structure of it. It's something you can come to for weekends, time off, or a change of pace. Not necessarily something that supports all aspects of daily life year-round. What this Easter weekend really highlights for me is how different life in Croatia looks now compared to how it feels as a visitor. Before moving to Croatia, places like this feel like temporary destinations, something separate from everyday life. But once you're actually based here, they become part of a larger experience. A city like Zagreb provides structure, work opportunities, and a stable base. And regions like Istria provide something completely different: space, nature, and a slower pace. One of the biggest advantages of living in Croatia is being able to move between both. It's something that's not immediately obvious when you're just visiting. But it becomes one of the more important aspects of daily life once you're here. And if you're considering moving to Croatia, this is really the key thing to understand, not just where you would live, but how different places fit into your overall lifestyle. It's just one of many choices you have to make when relocating. Whether you prefer the slower pace of life in Istria, for example, or the more cosmopolitan life in Zagreb. There's definitely lots to think about. So if you're thinking of moving to Croatia, understanding how these different environments work together is just as important as finding the right location that works for you. Join me as I show what it's like to live here and not just visit. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me in my next video.